Yes, g'day folks. Today we're chatting to Mitch Cleary and Cam Luke, two of the best in the business when it comes to the world of football and basketball here in Australia and around the globe as well, in fact. And before we do that though, just a big shout out to Matty Knight and to also Cozzy and the crew from Cotton Media, doing a great job with supporting local business around South Australia and interviewing some really good sports stars and people in the entertainment industry as well.
Welcome to Legends with Bevo. Thanks to the Holdy, Coopers, Anytime Fitness Glenelg, and Paradise Mazda. And now, here's your host, Bevo.
Well, what a pleasure to have today two of the best in the business, Mitch Cleary from AFL.com.au and Cam Luke from the Armchair Experts, as well as being a NBL commentator and expert with basketball. Great to have you boys on for a chat. How are you going with COVID-19 and what have you been doing to keep yourselves busy?
Jeez, Cam's going to take the expert twice in the same sentence to explain and set himself up. It's pretty rare, Bev.
True, but thank you also. I see you got my full-page email that I sent you the other day, Bevan, about how to intro me. So correctly well-read and well-researched when it comes to introducing me. But, I'll be honest. I know Mitch has got a fair bit on, but my life hasn't changed. Sitting on the couch, watching predominantly sport, it's turned into horse racing. And I got no mates, so essentially isolation life and quarantine just suits me, to be honest. I feel great. I'm an expert in quarantine life.
And yeah, you've been doing your own podcast as well, Cam. The Cam Luke podcast. Is that a shout out for you?
Thank you, buddy, where you get all your good podcasts. And Mitch was actually a guest on the pod a couple of weeks ago. We spent 45 minutes arguing, so it was good. But it's been a lot of fun, mate. But most of the time I just spend reading AFL.com.au because without blowing smoke up his arse, he has done a really good job, and they've done a good job of being able to continually churn out some content, Mitch. So I'm assuming that hasn't been overly easy.
No, thanks, Cam. I'm not spending 45 minutes listening to yourself ramble on your own podcast. There's a bit of other stuff to do. So it's been good to catch up. And, there's still footy going on. We've got a date now, which is great. Clubs are back at training, so it gives us something concrete to write about. And just can't wait for that first bounce in, 20 or so days from now.
Yeah, it's amazing how quickly it's come around. Obviously, we've been waiting for a long period of time since it was put on hold. Are you guys a bit surprised by the season starting now? Because there has been talk, Dennis Committee's come out and said, let's just play exhibition matches, and had all these other people coming out and saying different things about whether the season should still go ahead and whether there should be asterisks next to it and stuff. Start with you, Mitch. What's your thoughts on it, mate?
I'm surprised we're playing in June, to be honest. I thought it was going to be July, August, given how serious this thing was going. Australia's done a great job, and your crew in South Australia, Bev, has led that charge. But I just think... I think the asterisk conversation is null and void now. I think the amount of people, Nathan Buckley is as well opinionated as anyone in the competition. For him to come out and say that a flag is going to have no asterisks, I'll take that. So I think Dennis might be a little bit off the mark with that one.
What about yourself, Cam? Mate?
Yeah, I agree. I was surprised Dennis came out and said that, because it just makes no real sense. And a Brownlow, everyone's playing the same amount of games when it comes to guys being able to get votes. So I don't know why we wouldn't have a Brownlow or a best on. And I likened this last week in a tweet. I got a lot of grief about it. And I wasn't likening a hamstring injury to the situation with coronavirus and the illness. But the fact is, every single year, teams have injuries, teams have players unavailable, teams have challenges. And we don't have an asterisk. We don't have an asterisk against the West Coast Eagles winning in 2018 when you look at all Collingwood's defensive injuries that they had. We don't look at 2018 and say, well, there's an asterisk against West Coast because Richmond had one bad game and didn't play them in the grand final. So there's always challenges and there's always opportunities that pop up in different ways. Now, to be fair, and a lot of the grief that I got were from West Coast Eagles fans, and I understand the hub is different. If the hub ends up being an entire season's worth and West Coast and Fremantle spend their time on the Gold Coast and can't play any games in Perth, then there might be a little bit of a different conversation. But I don't believe that they will spend as much time there. I think out of the teams that are in the hub, I don't believe Brisbane, the Gold Coast or Fremantle can win it. And I meant the same about Port Adelaide or Adelaide. West Coast is the team that I thought would win the flag going in. They're better than the Suns. They're better than the Dockers. The Lions conversation is in Queensland a little bit different maybe. And then we could see, the Eagles play the last 6 games in Perth. I think it'll end up helping them. They've had Tim Kelly. I think there's no asterisk because an asterisk can only be put if there's only 8 games being played and we have 4 finals in it and it's a totally different system, which we're not going to have.
Yeah, well said. I 100% agree with you for what it's worth as well, boys, but my opinion means nothing compared to your experts. Hey, speaking of the hubs, there's been talk over in Adelaide at the moment. There's a lot of talk going on about whether, at one stage, Port and the Crows were going to go over to the Gold Coast, and now there's talk about maybe they might be able to do the fly-in, fly-outs, and they're talking about a showdown in round 2, which I think would be great. Over there in Melbourne, what are they saying about this hub situation? And I guess, the showdown's become huge around Australia, and over there in Melbourne as well. How good would it be to have a Friday night showdown, boys?
Oh, finally. I think South Australia's been crying out for a Friday night showdown forever. But I think, honestly, South Australian government are now playing with the AFL. I tweeted that during the week. Talk about your pumping your own tweets up, Cam. But for so long, the AFL has basically run the government and held the whip hand at these decisions. But finally, the South Australian government might be getting back a bit of their own medicine, given that it was only a week prior they said they weren't going to give exemptions for training. Now they've given it. Surely all along they would have known that. I think they're just toying with the clubs, and it's a big tick for the Power and Crows. It means they have 2 or 3 weeks less. In Queensland, they get to stay in their own beds for a bit longer. It's a massive advantage for them. And the way the SA government has sort of allowed this exemption now, I reckon they might only play 1 or 2 games in the hub, and there'll be exemptions for all Victorian teams flying in and out of Adelaide before we know it.
I agree. I think, and I don't want to turn this into a political conversation because I'm far from having any expertise when it comes to politics, but I think the South Australian government, I don't necessarily disagree with it, but I just don't think they wanted to be seen to be led by the AFL.
Yeah.
So I think they thought, I'm going to lay, obviously this is a serious health concern that we've got to obviously have in mind for everyone in the state, as all governments and federal government, of course, overseeing it all do. So I think that's where it sits. It does seem like they're playing with them because you're right. They would have had a fair idea. South Australia have done, Australia have done really well. South Australia done particularly well. I did say the last person released from hospital just in the last day or 2 from coronavirus. So that's, to be applauded by all the South Australians and the way you've all been handling it. And the South Australian government would have known, but yet again, they've got to stand, firm and be the ones leading the charge. If Adelaide and Port Adelaide have to travel at all they will do is play the Suns once, and that's already happened with Port Adelaide. So, it might make it a little complicated, but they might play the Lions away, the Suns away, and that'll be it. They're not going into a hub. They're not going to be spending a great lot. They might live on the Gold Coast or in Queensland for a week, but they're not going to spend 4, 6, 8 weeks in a hub nowadays. The whole thing has totally changed. And then it begs the question, West Coast and Fremantle, and I know that travelling is travelling, but I know we're a fair way down, but is there any chance that maybe the hub's better off being in South Australia rather than going across the other side of the country? Now, I don't know how much it costs right now to fly from Perth to the Gold Coast, but I assume it's Perth to Adelaide's a little bit cheaper for families and Tinder hookups and matches and all the rest of it. So I don't know how it all works, but maybe something else to look at if you're the AFL.
Just on the Crows, it actually might be a benefit for them because let's say they play the Power in round 2 and they go into the hub and play all the Queensland teams and all the WA teams. It's going to save the trip over to WA. It's going to save the trip to Queensland later in the year. So they go once, fly once, get it done with, and then they're probably playing home games in Adelaide later in the year, and they're probably only flying to Melbourne for a few games. So knock all those interstate trips out in one, and then it's all smooth sailing for the rest of the season.
Watch out for the Power.
Let's not go too far.
Well, how about that stat? The Swamp delivered that stat in the leap year since 2000. Every team that's been on top after round 1 in the leap year has won the flag. So maybe Ken Hinkley's Christmas is going to come at once.
I'll tell you this right now. Port Adelaide and Adelaide will have a nice raft, and Fremantle and the Eagles obviously have a nice raft of home games probably later in the year, touch wood. It'll set the Eagles up for a nice double chance and probably a real crack at a minor premiership. And for the others, it'll mean they just missed the 8 by a game or 2.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. Hey, the crowd situation, boys, obviously we're going to start off with no crowds. We saw that happening in round 1. Could you see in the future, like maybe September, October, if everything's going well, could you actually see crowds being there and maybe even a grand final with crowds as well with the 1.5 metre distance observed?
Well, it's perfect for Cam because he hates going to the footy. He'd rather just sit on his couch at home and watch the games. So I'm sure he'll expand on that. The only thing I've got the issue with.
Well, hang on, before you go any further, if you had a sharing couch at your house, you'd sit on it the whole time as well.
You might have to give us a tour of that little abode you've got there later on. Where are we getting? I think it'd be great to have 500, 1,000 people all spread out at the G, but it's going to be a logistical nightmare getting them in and out of the ground. How do you? What does everyone? All right, bloke in Bay 5, row D. It's your turn to get out of the stadium. Like, how are we going to get them in and out? It's going to be fine sitting in the stadium, but it's going to be a nightmare when everyone's outside and not obeying that social distancing.
I've been thinking about this a lot, and I've put together something for an NBL situation because the NBL's in a different situation where if they can't have any fans, they cannot play a season. They don't have a broadcasting deal that underpins the league. So without fans, there's no NBL year. So that's something that they're trying to work on. But this is the idea I had. How many bays at the MCG? Like, if we can have 100 people sitting together. So
I think there's 60 bays on the lower, around 55, 60 bays on the first deck.
So essentially we can fit, say we can fit 5,500 people on the lower deck. Again, at the top, we can maybe get 15,000 into the G. Now, I'm not necessarily speaking just in grand final day, but maybe we can fit 15,000 in. And when you're in primary school and it's assembly time, all right, or you're all at the front and they say, hey, Miss Jones, oh, yeah, 4 red, you leave, right? So you get a ticket that has like a particular sort of code on it. You have to be at the ground at this time. If you are not there ready to go in, you are not allowed to be admitted into the MCG. You're all sitting there. And then at the end of the game, the siren goes, the song sings, everyone's going nuts. The PA says, 1A, stand and leave. And I know it sounds ridiculous, but if you, and we're footy fans and sports fans here, in a situation where if someone said to you, you need to be at the MCG at 1 p.m. and once the game is done, you can't leave until you're given the AOK. And if you don't want to do it, you just get banned. If you try and breach social distancing, you're just like, mate, you don't come back. So I know it sounds nuts, but I think there's a way we can get 15,000 people into the G and maybe, a little less in the smaller grounds around the country.
Don't mind that, Ken. What do you think, Mitch?
That's just fantasy land, Cam.
Why?
What do you think? We're all in primary school again. How is that going to work? What happens when you got to go to the toilet? What happens if you want to go buy a pie all the time?
Well, these are things we're going to have to miss. This is the thing. If you are a fan, there may not be any food within the arena. If you go to a toilet, I'm sure that there's not going to be a million people rolling to the toilets at the exact same time. And keeping in mind, they are going to be fairly well spread out. So if you can tell me that at quarter time, more than 100 people, which is the legal amount to be together at the same time after June 22, are we going to bust to go to the cubicles? I think that possibly we've got a bigger issue than just football. I think that as fans, you are offered an opportunity, a unique opportunity to be a part. Now, if you think you don't want to go, you don't want to adhere to the guidelines, that's fine because it is unique. But it's also an opportunity to see some live sport.
I will say the biggest importance is getting the corporates in. These are the guys that basically fund the game. So you look at the grand final, it's only roughly 20,000 club members usually go. So it's important to get the corporates in out of everyone because all these deals that are already signed heading into the season all include grand final tickets and the like. So I think that's going to be huge to try and get some people in. How it happens though, maybe we need to cherry pick them in or something. I don't know.
Just on that too, just want to give a good shout out to the corporate partners who have very welcoming to me at certain times at AFL games in the last few years and let me in. So big shout out and hope to see you back at the games soon. And
I like it. I like it. Hey boys, something that's absolutely ridiculous and one thing I really don't understand now we've got a full AFL game of full contact, right? Tackling, sweat on each other, blood, sweat and tears, as they say. But after the game, the players aren't allowed to embrace, put their arms around each other and sing their club song after winning a classic game by a point, knock off the Crows in the showdown by a point after the siren or something like that. They can't even, put their arms around each other and embrace. Is that just crazy or am I just going nuts here? What do you guys think?
No, I can see both sides of it. The only thing I will say is it's just for the look. Like if you got kids watching on telly and all the players are high-fiving and hugging and that sort of thing, those kids are going to want to be doing it with their friends at, the next day and, their families and that sort of thing. So I do hear it that they're all, sweating on each other. There'll be blood going in the middle of the packs and that type of thing. But for the look and the image, I can see why they've gotten to that. Yeah,
no, it's just a perception thing. And look, you're right. Everyone raises it and understandably too. But I also think you're right. If we can continue, and the AFL sport, but in this particular case, AFL, they're such a great leaders in social causes, rightly or wrongly. And I use Anzac Day a lot. Like in the mid-90s here in Melbourne where we are, the Anzac Day March, Shine of Remembrance, you might get 5,000 people there. And Kevin Sheedy and Adelaide at Essendon and Collingwood kickstarted Anzac Day. And all of a sudden, you don't get there at 2 a.m. You don't get anywhere near the flame. And that's great. It allows new generations to understand exactly what Anzac Day is. Because I know I say this a lot and people think I'm joking. I'm not. Legitimately, there would have been kids coming through that thought Anzac Day was a holiday specifically bought in for a football match. And I think it's the same thing like that. But kids sitting at home, and I know there's athletes out there who don't want to be role models, but they are because they're extremely good at what they do. If they're sitting on the couch at home watching their favourite athlete and all of a sudden they've got their arms around their teammate or their best mate or whatever it might be after a game, that automatically links probably a little bit more than tackling someone on a halfback flank. But, yeah, it's an interesting one. I think Mitch and I spoke about this on the pod. It's going to add, like, the intensity of the team songs, the club songs, after round one were great to see. And it's something we hadn't seen a great deal outside of huge finals games. Hopefully we get to see it a little bit more now. And I don't know if you know this, Bev, but we do have a premiership captain within the realms. And I'm talking of Mitch Cleary, who led St Mary's to under-18 flag back in, what was it, 2013?
Mitchy.
What year was it?
2012. So the 10-year innings coming up. We might have to go social distancing with that.
Well, you lead a club song better than most. Like, to be able to take that bunch of misfits to a premiership, so you know what it's like to sing the song in full voice.
Yeah, we did it on the ground, we did it in the room, so maybe we get a few of those this year.
Yeah, you still do it at they still do it at the locals when 3 or 4 of the degenerates who have never kicked a football since catch up at their local Lammies, wherever it might be in Geelong. They still do it on the dance floor at 2 a.m., which is almost as weird as still wearing a medallion 10 years later.
Hey, the Armchair Experts team. Now, those people watching it, you recognise this face. Cam Luke, of course, doing a wonderful job with Coons. Normally we see him wearing a beanie.
I'm sorry for all those people out there that have to be subjected to that.
But the question is, mate, where's Mitch Cleary? How come he hasn't been given a gig on the Armchair Experts?
So the rules of the Armchair Experts is that you can't really have, well, to be honest, any journalistic integrity. So that's why Adam Cooney and I fitted so nicely on the couch. There was a slight discussion about Mitch being a part of the Armchair Experts in 2020. So hold it. You may see it at some point soon with the new project. But, the coronavirus really slapped the Armchair Experts around a fair bit. Now, not because Coons don't have a great deal of mates and social distancing is something we traditionally do anyway, but we had a couple of different things lined up. And Mitch was in the phrase between Mitch and Tom Brown and Davey Jackett to be involved in the Armchair Experts in 2020. So we'll see how it plays out.
Coons is still flat with me from that day I doorstopped him at the Botanical. I think it was 2014, 15 when the whole Essendon stuff was going. And I ran probably 80 metres up the road to try and get him, and he absolutely blanked me then. So we've had a rocky relationship for the last 5 or 6 years.
And then that's some of the issues we do find with the Armchair Experts is that, and we're an open forum, so we have a lot of feedback, traditionally bad, that comes through from fans who are so passionate, and it's what makes the show so fun. But, yeah, you're right. It's hard to get any respect or any, at least, conversations with journalists because at some point, they all wrote something bad about Coons as he limped his way to his 250th. You got to keep in mind, this is the guy.
He was just topping up his super. Yeah.
Of course he was. This is the guy who played his last game on a Sunday arvo at was then Etihad Stadium against 2 teams he played for, the Dogs and then, of course, the Dons. He plays his 250th. People don't remember. This was only round 22. There was still 1 round to go. The worst year in the history of the Essendon Football Club. And what does Coons do? Rather than hang around as a veteran leader to help a team decimated by WADA suspensions, he gets on the gas for 4 days, then calls John Worsfold on a Thursday and says, "Hey, Johnny, am I needed this week?" He's like, "Mate, never call me again." So journalists called him out at the time. So he missed. He's not the only guy no doubt, to get drunk on a Sunday or a Monday AFL play, but he is, I believe, still the only player to miss the game the following week with a hangover. So journalists gave him a bit of a spray about that, and he's a sensitive soul, Adam. So he hasn't forgiven all of them at the moment.
That's understandable. Your doorstops have been classic over the years, Mitch. Have there been situations where you've been, confronted with quite scary times, or has it generally been pretty okay?
It was actually funny. Some of the neighbours during the whole Essendon saga, I became had a love-hate relationship with a few of Stephen Dank's neighbours through that period. So that was interesting, and I'm sure that, I hope they're not watching. They might remember my face. There's been a few. Some good times and some bad, but it's funny. You sit in the car all day. You might be sitting in the car for 8, 9, 10 hours, and then it all happens in about 20 seconds. So Cam would be used to that type of experience. So it all happens pretty quick. And there's a bit of rush of blood when it's all happening and the camera's rolling, and you only get one chance at it. So you got to make it good.
You still talking about door stopping like the Stephen Danks of the world, or no? Okay. Well, how did you go with Stephen Dank? I know the neighbours weren't exactly thrilled you were there every single day, but Stephen Dank, was he more welcoming?
Yeah, and by the end of it, he sort of realised that was his lot, and he was going to be done with it every day. So I think he came round to it, and it was pretty warm in the end, really, as a young guy just starting out in the media. But he had his chance to, have his say. Hurdy had his chance. You can't forget through the whole experience, James Hird was basically holding press conferences on his front lawn through it. You think journos are sitting there, interrogating these guys, but by the end of it, James Hird was basically holding his media briefings out the front of his house. So there's a lot of stuff that goes on behind the scenes when you think it's not just a guy chasing someone with a camera. Half the time, a few of these things are actually pre-planned, if you could say.
I'm going to say this too, Bev. I'm going to tell a story. Obviously, Mitch and I have worked together a fair bit. And I actually thought about this the other day because I actually know this guy now. I've come across him a little bit in his his current employee. He works in the employment in the basketball world. It was 2010, and it was a Friday night, and we were the only people still in the office. I think we might have been working on a show, and Mitch came over to me and said, "Oh, look, I need some advice." And I was like, "Oh, well, I don't know where this is going to go." He's like, so Eric Hollingsworth, who was the Athletics Australia technical director at the time, and he was the head coach of performance. He had that blue with Sally Pearson heading towards the Commonwealth Games 2010. It's 2014 Commonwealth Games.
2014,
and he'd been sacked. Well, he'd been resigned, but he was on his way back. And Mitch had got a call. Athletics, he's starting to dominate the AFL world, but athletics probably wasn't his strong suit. So we had to go to the airport. So he's there shaving on this $6 electric razor that he'd picked up from Kmart a couple of hours earlier. And then he was on athletics, sort of know a little bit about. But I'll never forget it. So he ducked out to the Melbourne airport, and Eric is a very intense unit. Even if you know him to this day, and he's a great guy, great operator, what he does. He worked at Melbourne United when I came across him. But he refused to talk to Mitch. But he's quite a brisk walker. And it was at that time, I remember watching it on the news, and then Mitch the next day, he's like, he wouldn't talk. He's always out of breath. And from that time, that's when Mitch realised you need to have a bit of fitness about you to be able to have these type of doorstop experiences. It's not just about, putting on some weight and sitting in cars. It's also doing some cardio every now and then, because I wouldn't say it nearly killed him, but it came close when Eric Hollingsworth strode out of Melbourne Airport and Mitch, 150 metres in, gave up the ghost.
I still remember it. With the only crew there, it was about 1 a.m. at the time, and it was a massive story. Like, the disgrace, the Olympic coach and the fallout with Sally Pearson, who was our biggest star at the time. He actually ducked out the back of a side entrance, so not the typical. And I was sort of hedging my bets, thinking, well, if I was him, what would I be doing? So I knew he was going to be coming out some sort of side door. And 150 metres is not even a joke. We followed him from the terminal at Melbourne Airport all the way to the other side of the car park where he had a car waiting for him. And I reckon I would have fired off 12, 13 questions, and he didn't take the bait once. But I still remember seeing on the Today Show the next morning, and got a bit of crap about that for a while.
I will say, Eric once said to me that he looked at Mitch, and thought, if he gets 200 metres in, I'll answer all his questions. He was fairly confident. So in the end, he just outstayed him like a good racehorse over 2 miles. Just outstayed him in the last little bit.
Great story, Cam. I love it, mate. Hey, boys, we'll just finish with the talk of the night grand final. Obviously, the last few years has been so much speculation about whether we're going to have a twilight grand final, whether we're going to have a a night grand final after, say, 7 p.m. And it looks like this year it's going to actually happen finally. Mitch, firstly, I'll take your thoughts on it, mate, a night grand final. What do you think about it?
Yeah, I love the afternoon, but I'm all for it this year. I think to try and get some of that New South Wales, Queensland audience in, I'm just thinking putting myself in the opposite shoes as an AFL fan watching the NRL grand final. I wouldn't watch it if it was 2 o'clock in the afternoon, but I do watch it when it's at 6, 7 p.m. or whenever it starts. So I can see that for a guy in Queensland or New South Wales in my shoes who might be a diehard NRL fan. I think it's more likely to be able to be seen by that sort of audience at that time. And I think that's really important to get some new fans to the game. And I probably watch 4 or 5 NRL games in the year. 2 or 3 might be State of Origin, 1 or 2 might be a final. And if we can have the same cut through in the markets that are so important in Sydney and Queens and Brisbane and the surrounding areas, I think it's a major tick.
That's 100%, 100%, because too often when we have this argument, we have it amongst ourselves with the football fans who are going to be watching the game anyway. I know when I've broached this on Talkback Radio or on social media, the actual pushback is I get, oh, hang on, that's going to ruin my day. I'll get out of bed, have my first beer at 9, and it sets up my day. Well, I might not be awake at 6 p.m. It's like, well, we've got bigger issues if you can't wait to have a beer just a couple of extra hours to see a night grand final. But you're right. We are all the same people who argue it are going to be either at the game or watching the game. Now, I don't care what time the game is. I'm going to be watching it. But that's a very good point. There'll be people who, for whatever reason, in Sydney or Queensland or, Northern Territory or West Australia is probably a little bit different than AFL states. But that's the way. And I've argued this when it comes to entertainment, pre, post, halftime, all the rest of it. People's like, oh, yeah, we need Jimmy Barnes. It's like, no, we don't. We need Justin Bieber. We need someone. We shouldn't be putting post entertainment for people within the MCG. If we had Justin Bieber 5 years ago, I know it sounds ridiculous, and given him $3 million, do you know how many 14-year-old girls would have tuned in? We would have had another 5 million people watching the pre-match, and then it would have been on the TV. It would have counted. It would be ridiculously huge. And I know that, people within, I'm not a Justin Bieber fan as such, but, people within the MCG don't care about what's happening when it comes to the entertainment on the ground. So we've got to think outside the square. There'll be a night grand final this year, I think. Too many, and you'll know this more than I would, Mitch, too many influential people are telling us it's a night grand final, and Eddie McGuire's mainly the main guy right now pushing it. And if Eddie's pushing it so hard on his media platforms, it suggests that it's going to come.
And the other thing is less games this year. So much is owed to the broadcasters. And if the broadcasters are pushing for it, then if I'm the AFL, I'm doing that. I'm handballing the decision as much to them because they need to make up the lost revenue for the lack of games and the reduced, quality of atmosphere and the like. So if the broadcasters are pushing for it, then I'd give it a go. But I don't think you should lock it in permanent. I still love the afternoon, and maybe it's just it's a one-off, and let's see how it goes.
So that's a good point, Mitch. This is something that never gets raised. Just because we go to a night grand final doesn't mean it's night grand final for the rest of eternity. Who's to say that we don't just hey, you know what? We're going to do a night grand final this year. You know what's going to happen next week or next year? We're going back to 2. I don't know why it has to be locked in. You can work as a flexible situation. That may even change within non-Victorian teams. Like a night grand final might actually, it would help the West Coast Eagles if they play a Saturday Arvo game at Optus. Now, I'm not a big believer when it comes to a 6-day break being better than a 6.5-day break or whatever, but there could be ways to look at it there. And I just think that going forward, there's an opportunity to be able to be flexible with the time of the game. And, I didn't want to say, but I've been to a couple of Super Bowls. One was at twilight.
We almost got there without the mention.
One was at twilight, and then it goes twilight into night time, and it was cool. And the other one was full daytime, and that was just as cool. I don't think anyone's going to not watch the game if they're already going to watch it dependent on the time. And if someone says, I'm not going to watch a night grand final, they're either a liar or an idiot.
Yeah, no, I like it. I like it, boys. Keep it open, keep it flexible. But definitely a night one this year. It looks like it's going to be. So, hey, Mitch, Cleary and Cam Luke, thanks so much for joining us on Legends with Bevo. I know you guys have got much more important things to do today than listen to me. So, thanks for giving me your time. And it's been an absolute blast and a laugh and a half. Keep up the great work with both of what you're doing, and we'll speak again soon.
Thanks, mate.
Been a hot lot of my week, mate. And that's not even a joke. Thanks, my man.
Thanks, guys. Cheers.